Hi, I'm Larry Puckett, the DCC guy. Today I want to show you how you can go from a nice clean car like this one here to one that's obviously been up and down the railroad a few times and has picked up some nice weathering, some nice color. So stick around for the process. So how do you go about going from a nice clean car like this one to a very nice weathered car like this one right here without even using an airbrush? Because everything I'm going to show you today is going to be done with dry pigments, chalk, that kind of thing. So you'll be able to do yours even though you don't have an airbrush, and then I'll show you how to fix it so that you won't smudge it and mess it up every time you pick it up. And you won't have to use an airbrush for that either. So let's go ahead and we'll start work here. I'm going to go ahead and focus the camera down here on the workbench so I can show you how I go about doing this. Well, before we get started, let's take a look at some of the products that I use and would recommend that you give a try for your weathering on your model railroad. Now, one of the things that I've had for a long time are these Bragdon weathering powders. And this is the rust series that they did, and you can see it goes from a light colored rust here all the way to basically black here, so you can cover the full range. And these are all powders. You know, you don't get a lot in a package, but they go a long way. I've had these for over 10 years. You can also pick up similar products. These are AIM weathering powders. There's a medium rust and a dark rust, so you can get these. And all of these things, you know, you can order through your hobby shop, your local dealer, or you can probably look them up on their own websites, AIM and Bragdon. I know Bragdon has a website. Now, another thing that I've been using a lot lately that are very good are these pan pastels. And these are basically a pastel pigment, and I believe they have some sort of a binder built into them so they'll stick. Now, this is a set that I purchased, but I also added some things to it, like this black right here has some silver specks built into it. So it's really great for weathering a coal load on a steam locomotive, because it gives you that little bit of reflective color that you get with coal shining in the sunlight. And a lot of hobby shops carry the pan pastels. They become very popular with model railroaders. Another thing that I do use a lot and have used a lot is this particular set right here of chalks. You can see these are earth tones, and they come in this nice little box in a plastic tray. And you can see there's a range of earth tones from the yellow all the way to the black, with everything in between. So these are great. And I'll show you in a minute how I go about working with these. Another thing you can use are just plain old color chalks that you can pick up at a craft store somewhere. And I've got all different colors in here. I bought this whole collection of these. I use a lot of this dark charcoal color here, and there's some white in here, yellows. And the way I do this is, to get the black like I'm showing you here, I just take my scalpel and, let me move this out of the way, and this is just a fast food tray here. I think this probably had some kind of Chinese food in it or something at one time. But you can just take this and use your scalpel blade, and as you can see, you can create all kinds of powder from these without any problem at all. Get that nice dark gray in there. And then I just move that over to one side of my palette here, like this. And then I do the same thing with these pastels that I just showed you. We can just put some of that in here very quickly. And then basically this becomes a palette. So I've got dark brown, I have my dark charcoal gray here. Let me pick out another one. This is a much lighter gray, so let's use that. And I'll tell you why in a minute. You'll want a mixture of these. Okay, so I'm going to use some of this light gray. We'll get that in here as well. Okay. Now, that allows me to work with 3 colors here, the light gray, the dark gray, and the dark brown. And I can take differing amounts of this and mix them together here, so we can pull out some of this brown and some of this black or gray, dark gray, and just mix that together, and we've got a different color right there to work with. We can pick a little bit of this out here and bring over some of this lighter gray material and mix that together, and we'll give it a nice lighter color. So right now, all of a sudden, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different colors to work with here. Actually, this one is a dark brown that I had made earlier to use. So we've got 5 different colors to work with. So let's go ahead and get a car over here and start working with it. So right off, I want to start with this Milwaukee Racing and Troy reefer. So this is one of the products that Kalmbach occasionally puts out, these collector's cars, and this is named for their club layout there at Kalmbach headquarters. So let me go ahead and we'll take a look at this, because this particular car, it's a nice one to work with. Because of this yellow, you can use any of the darker colors. And I'm just going to apply a line of pigment here to these rivets, because you want to get anything that is standing up. And we'll also knock off these hand grabs here on there. Keep doing this all the way down. Anything that is standing up, you can apply a little bit of this too. Catch those rivets down at the bottom. We've got a rivet line here at the top. We'll work that. I generally work down though, instead of up. And all of this detail around the door, you want to just bring it out. Okay, like this. So you can see those details in there. Let me zoom in just a little bit for you. Okay. So you can see the details, the rivet heads. We'll do these ladders here, this ladder grab, whatever, and work these. Like this. Now these cars, reefers tended to get really pretty dirty. And they're not the bright yellow things that we see and remember in a lot of the pictures. But at any rate, once you've got this on here, you can then go over it. And one thing I like to use are these sponge pads. And these are used for cosmetics, for applying cosmetics. And you can apply with these as well. I like to use them more for rubbing the material off. And what's going to happen is when you run over here, you can see it picks up a lot of that pigment. And you can just wipe it right off of there, get rid of that excess. Okay, so I'm getting it off and creating a lot more color and detail around the edges here. So that when you do that, the darker color is left around the rivets and around the raised portions here on the door, everywhere. And then you want to clean off the area in between. So you can see it's doing a nice job there. Now you can pick these up at your local drugstore. Just look in the cosmetic sections. If there is a supply house in your area that sells beauty parlor supplies, you can get packages of these. I believe I ordered these here off of eBay and got them fairly inexpensively from China. Probably picked up a lifetime supply. Okay, so I'm removing a lot of the detail, or a lot of the excess pigment that I applied here. And you want to try to get it evened out. You can see it's a little bit heavier on that side. But As you can see, it's nowhere near as heavy now as it initially was. I'm also going to knock off the roof here while I'm at it. So let's do that. I'm going to hold it here. And for that, I'm just going to stick with the same weathering palette because we want the color on the car to be similar all over because that's what they're going to be picking up. Now, of course, the roof is going to be a darker color than the sides probably because it's picking up locomotive exhaust. And we'll do this side as well. Here. Run this, get this down into the crevices on the roof. Now this is a very quick and dirty process, and literally dirty though. But it is quick, so you can do it fairly quickly and move on. Let's see, we'll get it in here. I want to get it into the depressions here on the top of the walkway to make it pop out like this, so that when you're done, it looks almost as if it's one of those etched metal walkways that you can purchase. And make sure you work in some of the browns in here. You don't want it all to be that black color. Now, get it in. One thing you might want to try, and I forgot to put them on, is a pair of latex gloves, and that'll help keep a lot of the pigment off of your hands, and that way cleanup will be a lot faster in the end. I find that very important for what I'm going to show you as the next step, and that is fixing this permanently. Now, another way to kind of clean this up, I have an old toothbrush here that I use a lot, and you can just run that over here, and it will help even it out quite a lot and work it down into the details, and yet remove a lot of the excess in the process. And that's all part of the game. You want to put as much on as you can, and then spread it around and even it out before you finally fix it on here. Okay, so that's that. Let's do an end as well. I'm going to see if I can hold it. I'm going to have to put my finger on the top here. Okay, so let's do the end. I'm going to take more of this and we're going to apply it in here. Now, because the end is black, that dark gray is not going to work. So this is where I'm going to be using some of the lighter grays. And that lighter pigment that I made up a minute ago by mixing the brown and the light together. Okay, like that. So it's on pretty heavy now. And once again, we'll go over it with our brush, toothbrush here, and work it down in there, move it around quite a bit. And don't worry about it. If it looks like it's heavy like this, it won't be once we're finished. So we've got quite a bit of color on the end now. Now, another thing that you can do while you're at it, take some of the lighter colored pigment and work it into the trucks, the side frames on these trucks. Because you want them to pop out, because they're hidden underneath of the car in the dark a lot of the time, and you really don't see them if you don't do this step. So this will bring out a lot of the detail, and if we work in a little bit of the brown, it gives you a little bit of rusty appearance in there. So we're just going to work that in. There we go. That looks pretty good. Now, another thing I'll tell you that you need to think about, and that's the couplers. Now, on my couplers, what I do is, and this is the fun part, I take my individual couplers and just put them here, like this, inside these little corrugations on some cardboard. And then, since I have an airbrush, I just spray these lightly with dark brown. Now, you can buy a can of dark brown spray paint at the local hardware store and do the same thing. Just give it a nice misting. Don't overdo it because then you can clog it up. But as you can see, if you put a light misting on here, it will add just a touch of weathering to the couplers, and then it will look pretty good on your model railroad. And on these, you can, I don't know if you can tell, but these are some that were done that way. They've got the brown faces here on the ends to the couplers. If you run your fingers over these, you will find that you can remove a lot of the excess on the cars. So what you want to do is some way to fix these materials in place so that you're not going to rub them off just from, regular handling on the model railroad. And there's a couple of things that you can use to do that. Now, one that I use here is this Krylon Matte Finish, number 1311. And you can find that at various arts and crafts shops. Sometimes you can find it at local hobby shops that carry Krylon products. And I will say that any spray-on type of clear lacquer finish will work like this. This is all these are. And this will give you a matte finish. Another thing that I use is Tester's Dull Coat. And that'll give you a really dull coat, let me tell you. Of course, you do have to have an airbrush for this. But Tester's also sells this in small spray cans. Now, to be honest with you, in the long run, it's cheaper to go ahead and buy an airbrush than to keep buying those little small cans of dull coat from Tester's at your hobby shop. But you can do it if you only have a handful of cars that you want to work on. And this will give you a very, very flat finish. Whereas this one here gives you more of a matte finish. So it has a little bit of a sheen to it. Now, one thing I wanted to point out, the Krylon and the dull coat are lacquers, but you can also get these clear flat finishes. Now, this is a Model Master paint, also made by Tester's, but it's an acrylic and it's a clear flat. So if you have an airbrush, you can try that. Also, I suspect that they probably have this in a small spray can. So you might want to check that out at your local hobby shop. For you guys in the UK, I know that there are various companies over there that produce a clear flat as well and a clear gloss. So what I'm going to do is take this car out into the driveway and spray a nice liberal coat of this Krylon matte finish. So I'll be back in just a minute and show you what that looks like. Okay, I'm back now, and you can see I put on my glove to keep all that overspray of lacquer off of my hands. And you can see that it's been toned down quite a bit as a result of the spraying. And you'll find this is true, particularly of pigments, that anytime you spray them with some sort of fixative, either dull coat, like this one here, or the fixative spray that I showed you in the can, it will take a lot of the color back out of it. So it won't be anywhere near as dark as it looks when you finish applying the pigments. And you can see here the roof, it's also nowhere near as shiny as it was. At any rate, you can see that a lot of that pigment is still in there, gives it a nice sooty look to it. And the same here, you've got the wheels and the sides of the trucks. They're nowhere as light as they were, but they have been toned down. They're nowhere near as black and shiny as they were a few minutes ago. Now at this point, it's time to go back and address that because you've taken off a lot of the color that you wanted to add. So I'm going to go ahead, and once you've applied this stuff, it does provide a little bit more tooth for the pigments. So be aware of that it's going to hold a lot more pigment. So if I apply that, you'll see it goes on quite nicely here. And we're bringing out more of that detail again. And I'm going to clean that up a bit. There. Okay. You can see there's nowhere near as much color as when I got through before. So let's go ahead. We'll go ahead and pop in a little bit more in here. So this really is an iterative process. You want to do it, apply it, spray the fixative on, be it dull coat or the Krylon, and get this to where it looks pretty grimy again because we took away a lot of that griminess. Okay, so I brought it back again, and let's do a little bit more here while we are at it. I'm going to add a little bit more brown this time. and just apply it to the rivet lines. And anywhere we've got raised rivets, we want to get that done again. So like I said, this is an iterative process. We want those details to pop once we're done. And then I'll just run it, my finger up and down here to spread it out. There. So, I'm going to go outside and give it one more shot, and we'll see what it looks like after that. Once again, I'm back from the driveway, and you can see that I've applied just a very light coat to the wheel, or to the trucks, and so they've got a little bit more of the lighter gray left on them, and the same goes here on the end. Just a very light layer of the fixative, so that we've got a lot more left here on the end as well. So you want to be able to see that you've done the weathering. So it's important that you try different color mixes to do this, and keep applying the overcoat until you get just the right amount of clear coat to protect your finish, to protect the pigments that you've applied without totally obliterating them. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at another one. Now these were a type of car that were produced during World War II, and they're a composite. So they're a hopper. They have steel bracing and a steel bottom, but you can see here they have wooden sides. So that's why they're called a composite hopper. And they were made during the war because it saved on steel for making Liberty ships and things of that nature, battleships. And so they were able to use wood for the side here. And these didn't last a long time, but they were still present in the 1950s, which is what I model. So what I want to do is show you the difficulty that you run into with weathering a very dark color like this one. Now in this case, we're definitely going to start with the lighter colored pigments and apply those to the rivet lines again, because that's where you're going to pick up most of your road dust and grime, and it's going to get stuck in those areas. So again, I'm just going to run it over those lines like this. We'll run in some brown in here as well to give it a little bit more detail. And it's going to look pretty crummy by the time I get finished here, because I am really applying it pretty heavy. And you don't want to go with something like this black back in here, because you're not going to be able to see much of it. See, that's what you get, practically nothing from that one. But if you mix this gray in here, you're going to get a lot of details popping. Okay. Put more on here. Cover up that dark stuff that I put on as an example. Okay, so I've got that. Get these ladder rungs done here with my mixes. And when I make these mixes of the pigments, I'm not being very careful. I'm just mixing it around because you're going to get a lot of variation on the cars anyway as a result of road weathering. Because what gets kicked up, Mother Nature doesn't care whether she's mixing light-colored earth with dark colors or what. It's whatever ends up being kicked up by the wheels and then getting washed off during the rain. Okay, now I'm just going to run that through there, and we'll run our foam brush over here again, kind of clean things out here in between. We are going to, one of the nice things about these composites is that a lot of the weathering, a lot of the dirt and grime got down in between these boards. So it gives you a little bit more detail on these hoppers as a result. Okay, getting that covered. Now, so you can see we do have a bit of weathering now. Let's do here again. Unfortunately, all that black tended to fill in here, so now we'll clean it off and see what we've got down in there. Okay, that looks good. I'm going to do the same thing here on the ends. Get those kind of weathered. And I'm mixing the brown in with the gray to get some more details. Also going to run a bit down here in the end of the car where there's this air reservoir for the brakes and the regulator. So you want to run all of those things down in there and get them weathered as well. Otherwise, people are just not going to notice them. So there, I've given it a good coat. We can run some down here on the underside as well. Get some of these members coated. Make sure I've got enough here on the side frames on the trucks. And then I'm going to run out and give it a blast with the fixative. Okay, so once again, you can see that almost all of my color is gone. So I'm going to go ahead and repeat the process, add some more color to our side frames, get them looking dusty. And because I've already applied one layer of the fixative, the Krylon, it's going to grab a lot more and hold on to a lot more of the color. So we'll work it down in here, give it a little bit more brown in here, because these things get kind of rusty looking over time. And once again, we'll run it over the car. And of course, you know, you can experiment with all types of combinations of brushes and colors and weathering techniques. I'm just going to work this down in here and then run my finger over it to clean out a little bit of the excess on here. Okay, I'm going to run back outside again and give it another blast. Okay, now after the second application, I think you can see that we've built up a little bit more color here. It's now sticking in some of these depressions between the boards. So we're really getting there. I'm pretty happy with it as it is. So I'm going to stop right here and leave it at that. I've still got additional color down here on the trucks. Picked up a little hair from the brush. But right now, that's about as far as I want to go, because you know, you can go and you can really dirty these things up and really weather them, or you can make them look sort of like they're an in-use car and not something that's sitting on the rip track waiting to be torn apart and junked. So I now have the reefer and the hopper weathered to my satisfaction. It's a very, very striking difference in the base color that we had to start with. So it's a lot easier to get the color on the MRNT reefer. That yellow shows just any amount of dirt that you hit it with. Whereas on the hopper, it took a little bit more effort to get some color to stick down in those depressions between the boards and along the rivet lines along the sides and the struts. Well, that's a wrap for today's video. I hope I've given you enough tips so that you can go out and pick up some chalk or weathering pigments at your local hobby shop and give your hand a try at weathering some of the rolling stock for your model railroad. It's a very easy process and a very forgiving one, because with all of these chalks and pigments, you can generally just wipe them right off without any problems, dry the car, and start all over again. So you don't have to worry about messing up. You can try it until you develop the process to the point that you like, and then you can finally apply the fixative like I showed you in the video. So have a great week, have a great weekend, and we'll see you here next week with another video from the DCC Guide. Bye now.